Hi, everyone. Thank you so much thank you for being here with us today. Very excited to be sharing the stage with some incredible artists. My name is Tara Pixley. I'll be moderating today. And this panel is about, we're showing some of the work of the artists here. We have also several other artists who are in the show Parallax, which you can see. Hopefully you'll go and take a look, or you've already seen it. And we're really focusing on portraiture of queer and trans people of color. So we'll be talking about that today, kind of the process of all of the artists who are here right now, and sort of sharing and discussing why we think this is a very important kind of intervention into the way we think about photography and the way we represent queer and trans people of color. So with that said, I will toss it over to the artists. Let me actually introduce each of you. So we have Wirija, Mengwen, Gabriel, Garcia-Roman, and Kaman Se. Roman, sorry.
Hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Wirija, but I go by Ellie. I'm originally born and raised in Indonesia, Jakarta, the main city to be exact. And I moved to New York 6 years ago for art school. And I went for graphic design, but I decided that that's not for me, and I wasted 4 of my years. But I mean, I'm sure you learned something along the way. But I worked at ad agencies, designing coupons for hair companies, and I was like, no, this is not for me at all. So I just decided to start freelancing 2 years ago with my photography. And yeah, I love making conceptual work and just work that you'll see, it feels like a movie scene almost. You just enter this completely different dimension. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mengwen Cao. I was born and raised in China and came to the States 7-8 years ago. I also didn't study photography at the beginning. My major at that time was education technology, which I'm still passionate about. But yeah, I'm too distracted by photography and visual storytelling, so here I am now. Right now, I freelance as a photographer, videographer, multimedia producer. Yeah, I guess my style now, I think my goal right now is to normalize tenderness and love. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gabriel Garcia-Roman. I was born in Zacatecas, Mexico, grew up in Chicago, and have been living in New York for the past 20 years. And I didn't start off as a photographer. I actually worked for a software company, 9 to 5. Been doing that for 20 years. And I went back to school about 15 years ago, maybe a little less than that, to actually do something that I enjoy, which is photography. So didn't really start taking photographs until 15 years ago, I guess. So, and I like photography, but I also really like manual labor or handwork. So a lot of my work is manipulating the photograph, either collaging, weaving, or printmaking. And the work that I'm going to show today is actually a printmaking process, but it's a photo-based process. And I just enjoy highlighting my queer community of color, so that's what I do, and that's my life's work. So, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kaman Se. I'm an artist and an educator. I was born in Hong Kong and raised in the United States, and have been living in New York City since 2003.
Thank you all. So because it is a photo exhibit, we of course want to look at the images. So we're going to kind of cycle through some of the photos that you each selected that you felt represented your work well. And a few of the photos that you'll see here are in the exhibit, but many of them are not. So it's kind of a wonderful opportunity to see additional images in your series. You can also see over there.
Oh, okay, perfect.
A little easier.
Yeah. So yeah, this is the first work I chose, is of Gabriel, and it's originally for a hair story. It's like experimenting with different like hair types and just like colorful images. And I worked with a hair artist that's based in Philly, and he like painted all these like planet orbs on his head with like hair dye, and I worked with a really talented makeup artist, Sue Raisa. And usually with most of my projects, I tend to like style it myself, just because it's pretty hard to get a stylist here if you don't have a pull letter for a magazine. So I know a couple shops in New York that like loan me their clothes, and I'd like to be a part of that process too, because then I could get to decide like the entirety of the image and how it all comes together with styling. And yeah, I think I love his posing here too, just because it's like a very like powerful thing. It's almost like he just is holding his grace, you know? Yeah, and let's go to the next image. Originally, I was only shooting Isaiah, which was the guy on the right, but he also brought his partner along to the shoot. And this was actually like, I rented a studio for an hour, and then this, I just shot Isaiah individually, and then at the end, I was like, I would love to take some portraits of them together. And this was like accomplished in like 5 minutes when the studio guy was like, hey, are you done? Like, and I was like, I just have to do it. And, I just like the polarity of like their shirts, even though it wasn't matched, like they weren't planning anything, but like just the connection between them two, you can really feel it in the image and the love that they share for each other and how tender they are with each other. And I think that's like such a beautiful thing, especially with queer relationships, because you don't tend to see that like silent moments that you share with one another just like intimately. So yeah, let's go to the next image. This was Laquan. This was, he's also a photographer. And I just specifically wanted to shoot him because he experiments with his hair a lot. And he actually got like this really long braid, and he just like braided it onto his hair, and it went all the way down to the ground. He was actually, since the dress is extremely long, I put like a ladder. He was actually standing on a ladder, and it just like, elongated his body extremely and makes him, I was inspired like by Renaissance paintings when I made this image, and like how it's so like whitewashed, and I just wanted to make my own painting through an image. And the designer is also extremely talented. Her name's Chanel, and she does like all these beautiful dresses, like handmade. So yeah, this is my form of a painting. And sorry. And this was shot in Central Park. I also pulled the clothes for it. And also with the makeup, like we incorporated the flowers in the field. We like picked a couple petals and put it on Mars' face. And it was during golden hour, and I just like how the light is like shining and almost like showing their radiance and just how powerful they are, And it almost seems like you just like walk into this scene and they're just like sunbathing, just like enjoying the sun and like how beautiful it is that day. And then the last one is of Brian. So in Indonesia, where I grew up, like the underground scene for music is actually like hardcore punk. And I always just loved like seeing that scene like encapsulate and grow on its own. And you would just see like Indonesian kids like under the bridge, just like with crazy long punk hairstyles and like, DIY clothes that they cut up on their own because they, don't really have the means, but they're so creative in their way that they like modify the stuff that they have and make it into something like even greater, because you see the personal touch in the clothing and how they represent themselves. And it's surprisingly hard to keep this hairstyle if you don't have extremely strong gel. So if you want to recreate this, you just need to like put crazy gel on your hair, like a crazy amount, and like hairspray it like so much, and it almost is like they'll stay for like 2 days if you don't wash your hair. But yeah, Brian is, and the backdrop for this, I just got like a plasterboard from Staples, and I like got some spray paint and just like modified it my own because I wanted to sort of keep the color of greens. But yeah, so that's the end of this. Here you go.
So this is my friend Luke. We were just traveling in Casco, upstate New York, and then he just happened to have this mirror with him, and it was just sunset time, and I just saw this reflection on him. I'm like, stop, stop right there. And yeah, I always stare at people in really weird way. It's usually because I saw this crazy light on them, and yeah. So yeah, because my background, I guess I'm still doing a lot of documentary photography and photojournalism, so I'm pretty used to follow people around and just let them do their thing, and then try to find beautiful moments in between, and try to really observe how they interact with the environment and how light shed on them. And I really try to capture quiet, silent moment in between where they seem to be somewhere else, but they also are still here. This is my friend Grace. We were in San Fran, and I have a lot of genderqueer friends, like gender fluid, and I'm really, really grateful to be surrounded by friends like that and to just normalize how fluid gender can be. And when we saw this, that sculpture, they have a really masculine face, but they also have boobs. We're like, oh, that's your spirit animal. So yeah, we just made a portrait there. And this is my friend Amory, and this is before she was about to move, and she really wanted someone to help her capture the home, the space she stayed at, and really decorated and made it herself. So yeah, we decided just hang out in her room for a whole afternoon and play with random cameras and lenses and just have fun. I really really appreciate those moments when my friends or like someone I don't know yet and later become my friends, like that quality time you spend with each other, and you just have, like, you don't shoot all the time. You just like chat in between and wait for a good light and talk to each other and see what they like. When I'm making these kind of portraits, one of my goals is to make them feel empowered. So it really mattered to me how they see the images, how they see themselves in the images, and that make me really happy when they feel seen in the photos. This is also my friend. We were just hanging out, and then I saw this light again. I'm like, can you just stay there? I think I really can see this tenderness in her eyes. And I think it's really important for me to be living in the moment and be really present and really feel the emotion, and then try to capture that with my camera. And again, my friends, Jasmine is part of Bufu, which is how I actually got more involved in a lot of QTPOC community here. They hold a lot of spaces for our community to do events and to educate each other. And this is one of their party they threw, and they're a power couple. And we were just playing in this bar and capture moments together and see how they interact with each other in this really natural way. I think for us growing up, at least I didn't really see a lot of romantic or nice representation of queer love. So right now with my own personal work, I really want to capture moments like that to kind of show future generation and also remind myself how beautiful our connection can be. And I think that's also an easier way for people who don't really understand us yet to kind of ease their way into our life, you know? Yeah.
So I'm actually going to start from the end because sorry. So the project that I'm showing today is called Queer Icons. Queer Icons is a portrait series that highlights the queer community of color that I started about 7-8 years ago. And when I first started the project, I started photographing my friends and friends of friends because at the time I had gone back to school, went back to school in my 30s, and I went back to school for studio art, was taking a lot of art history courses, being asked to go to a lot of museums, galleries, and in all these spaces that I was going, I was never seeing myself represented. I was never seeing my community represented. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to create my own body of work and insert our narrative into the art world. I'm a huge fan of Renaissance paintings. So I the body of work that this project is based on a lot of Renaissance. And also, I always like to say that I grew up Catholic, and so religious art was my introduction to art. So you'll see a lot of that in my work. So the reason why I wanted to start with this one particularly is because, like I said, I first started this project photographing my friends, and then the project was getting a little too big, and I decided that I wanted to hone it in a little bit. Then I met Mitchell, who was referred to me by somebody. Usually, how I do all my prints or all my photographs in my living room. I'm total DIY. Like I can't afford my own studio or rent studio space, so I make share work wherever I can. So my living room is a great space for that. And so every time that I was photographing people, I knew these people, right, because they were my friends. And then I started photographing people that I didn't know, and Mitchell was one of those first victims, I guess. Anyway, he was as socially awkward as I was, and so he came by and was hesitant to be photographed. And we were having a conversation, and he's like, I don't think I can do this, once he saw all the lights set up and everything. So I wasn't going to let him just get away. So I was like, well, what do you need? What do you want? And he's like, well, I need to get high. And then I'll relax a little bit. So we did. We went to my backyard and we hung out. We smoked a little joint. And then we just were having a conversation. And he shared his story with me, which really impacted me. And it really impacted this project. So he shared a story where he had run away from home, moved to New York City as a teenager, and started doing sex work as a way to survive. And one of his closest friends, was murdered by a John. And he was a teenager, Mitchell. Well, both were teenagers, but Mitchell took it upon himself to make his friend's murder be known. So anytime there was a press conference, he would go there and shout his friend's name, bringing visibility, or trying to bring some kind of visibility to this murder. And so I started thinking about that, and I started thinking, like, these are the people that I should be highlighting, are activists and community organizers, because these are the people that are going above and beyond their call as humans and for the betterment of our community. So that's when things shifted in my project, and ever since then I've only been photographing activists, community organizers, and artists, poets, people that are actually putting issues that affect the queer community of color out into the open. So this is Mitchell Mora, and so this is it's a photogravure, and typically photogravures are just black and white, or basically depending on what the ink is, the color of the ink. So with this one, it's black ink, but all the color that you see is actually collaged decorative paper that's incorporated into the project, into this print. And so the ones that I chose are, well, the reason why I chose the images that I'm choosing are for different reasons. So this is Jamal, who now goes by Fatima, and I'm sorry, so going back, so the other print didn't have any text, if you noticed. When I first started, because it's a project that I've been working on, I like to explore different ideas or kind of expand and go deeper into the project. So when I first started, I was just taking their portrait, putting it out there, and when people would see it, people would ask me, well, who are these people? That got me to think about the idea that as a community, we're already erased, our voices are already silenced. And it makes sense for me to collaborate with the person whose portrait I'm taking and ask them to write about their identity around their portrait, sort of to amplify their voice, and so this is one of the first ones that I did where I incorporated text, their text. And I really appreciate handwork. I really appreciate personal touches. So I wanted this to be handwritten by the person. So the text that you see is actually, they wrote it, but they also hand wrote it. Not directly onto the print, but it's a long process, but that's a screen print of their text that they gave me, that you see in their background. And so I don't prompt them. The only prompt that I give them is just write about your identity or write affirmations or something that you want to put out into the universe for other people to know, if it's about you or your community or whatever it is whatever type of energy you want to put out. So the reason I chose Jamal is because they were working on a documentary called No Fats, No Femmes. And another reason why I chose Fatima is because they are somebody who embraces three things that in our current society are looked down upon or lowest of the totem pole: black, femme, and fat. And they love themselves so much that they don't mind being called fat, or they embrace it. So I think that's a really strong message, and that's one of the reasons why they're in this project. This is Erica Hart, also a very active activist, somebody who's amazing and constantly putting out material on social media, very important messages. If you don't follow I Heart Erica, you should. And again, the text around their image, I wanted to push the concept of the halo a little more, so I started incorporating sequins or other materials into the prints. Carlos and Fernando, a brown queer couple based out of LA, both social workers or work in the mental health industry. And one of the reasons why I chose them is because queer love, how often is that documented, especially queer love between two brown men. where, at least in Mexican culture, machismo is a huge problem, where if you're a man who loves other men, you're automatically just the lowest of the totem pole, right? But I wanted to put them up because I really appreciate the fact that they've been together for almost 15 years. Something else, something that is also not highlighted in the queer community. And I just love this image so much. And a little story about this is that one of them is a Virgo, I'm a Virgo, and we're very particular. And so those hand gestures that you see are not random. They practice them for a week. So like all the way down to the finger. So I really appreciate that story. That's it. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Well, thank you. I think we should just stop now and just do Q&A. How do I? Okay. The edit or the selections of images that I'm showing are from a project called Narrow Distances, and it's a long project, so it's like 7 or 8 years now. Or actually, from the book, there's older pictures from the early 2000s, and it's actually a series of photographs that I make with friends and friends of friends, strangers who become friends. And sort of every year or like every few months we make new pictures, and it's sort of this long thing that keeps happening. The book came out last year, August of 2018, or July, August, and actually I'm going to plug, we'll be at the New York Art Book Fair, and I'm doing a signing on Saturday at PS1. So the project involves sort of this sort of mental imaging. So in the process, I'm actually interviewing people and actually sort of walking through and sort of pinging ideas and thinking about what kind of images we want to make, in what ways we want to be seen. And then we sort of storyboard or even try different ways of sort of making a picture together. And so the spaces that we choose are all significant. They hold memory, or are actually surrogates of different places. And so we sort of build a picture together. They're all, most of these pictures are made with a 4x5 with a view camera, so it's a slower process where even if we're shooting or together for a whole day, 6 hours, we only make 20 exposures at the most. I only have 10 film holders. And it's sort of this slow engagement. And then I guess, the edit here involves pictures made in New York as well as in Hong Kong. And so in my work, I'm always trying to think about how to sort of build bridges and connect these communities. Yeah, I guess that's it. I'll keep it short. Yeah.
Thank you all so much for sharing that. It's really interesting to always, anytime you get to hear kind of the processes behind an image or your thought process behind an entire series, and watching it develop, as you were talking about, Gabriel, is really cool. I heard each of you a lot of referencing around tenderness, and several of you mentioned kind of the importance of depicting or representing queerness, and especially queer people of color in photography, and the ways in which we don't typically see ourselves. Could you all speak to that a little bit more? What do you think is the value and the importance and the power of representing visually the queer people of color experience? In no particular order.
To me personally, I think it's extremely important, just because growing up in Indonesia specifically, the government is run by like religion, and the main religion is Islam. And then the second most important religion is Christianity. And I particularly grew up in a very Christian household. Like my grandfather was Christian, and then my parents are like very involved with the church. And, you know, they like volunteer. They like, you know, was a part of the church, and just in terms of like offering their services and like spending more time just like, you know, representing that. But, you know, growing up for me, I felt extremely isolated because I didn't even think my sexuality existed at all. I just thought like, oh, the normal thing is like when a man is with a woman, you know? And for me, I just never felt like I related to that. And like, you know, when I was a kid, I'm just extremely like rough, and I was like tomboy, I guess. So, you know, my mom said in primary school, I would just have like a gang of boys around me, and they'll just follow me to the cafeteria. I was like their ringleader. And I was like, oh, I guess that sounds about right. And like, you know, and then once middle school comes and like hormones start pumping through your body, you're like, I would have like friends who are girls, and I'm like, oh, damn, she's really cute. And I'll be like, but is this normal? Like, can I do that? You know? And I didn't have representation at all in media too, because media generally is extremely censored just because like of the government and religion. So I never saw any queer relationships in TV, and I was like in front of the TV for like 10 hours straight every day, and I'm like, why is so I don't exist, you know? And so to me, like, it's so important to represent queer relationships because like you start to feel like you belong somewhere, like you belong in a community, people who like feel like you and had the same experiences as you. And I think that's like extremely important because especially coming from a place that doesn't exist at all to coming to New York and seeing like myself represented in other people, and just like I'll see queer relationships on the street and I'll be like, oh wow, like, you know, and I have the liberty to like love who I wanted to love, you know? So yeah, I think it's just extremely important to let people know, especially like in corners of the world, like where I was from, like with social media too, like it's not as censored as mainstream media. So I'm sure people in Indonesia could see that too, like on social media, people post it and it will reach them too instead of like the traditional route with media. That's why as like artists, it's so important to create work and put yourself out there because there's people who want to hear your voices, who feel like the things that you feel. And yeah, I think that's like our responsibility as an artist too.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think for me, growing up in China, I have the same issue with media representation for queer community. I was pretty geeky. I started just watching Japanese anime and comic books when I was really young, and I got into like cosplay world and listened to a lot of gay. Yeah, I just watched a lot of gay things. And but at the same time, although I was consuming those contents, they are all fictional. And when I was in China, just seeing news or like the Chinese TV shows, movies, I don't see any queer relationships. So that gap was really weird for me. And also, yeah, I started to have feelings for girls when I was young, and I remember just feeling so guilty. But at the same time, I with the content I consume, I also feel like I'm pretty normal. And then yeah, it's again that conflict just gets, I don't know what to do. And then coming to the States, just having more open queer friends around me, or just seeing more queer content out there, I started to feel, oh, actually I am normal. Like I think it's very different to know one thing as a theory versus to actually feel it, to own it. It took me a long time to actually own it, to own my queerness, to be really actually proud of it. So I think part of that is to see real people doing real things, and just everyone's okay with it. So I really wanted to create work that speak to that normalcy, and that's why I think, although my photos are these series are mostly a collaboration from with the people I photograph. It's still pretty much based on reality and a little bit beyond reality, and I really want to portray that love and tenderness. And then I was also thinking about how my parents' generation would see these photos. When I came out to my parents, they asked me a lot of questions like, "Are you gonna be responsible to your life?" And like, "Are you gonna have disease?" And all these things that. This misunderstanding of queer community, it's really based on how they consume media. I understand where these questions come from. It's really because they worry about me, because they've only seen negative representation of queer community. So I think now, yeah, my mission is really to bring more positive side to the queer community, and to show other people that we're like everyone else. We're not perfect, but we're not. Yeah, we exist. We're here. We're here.
I definitely, obviously, think it's important to highlight the queer community of color. Specifically, I started this project in 2011, I believe. And around that time, marriage equality was a huge issue. Also, there was a lot of queer representation in the media, but not diverse. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to change that and make sure that when you do see a queer person of color, it's not just somebody who's downtrodden, a victim, or an HIV medication ad, which is the only time that I would ever see my community represented. So I wanted to create a body of work, or I thought it was important to highlight my community as deities or as saints, because they're deserving of that representation. So yes, definitely think it's important.
Well, I grew up in the United States, and it was this sort of, this lack of thing, this sort of, I mean, it seems like what a lot of people are talking about is just these absences and occlusions, and sort of anytime we saw any, or growing up, anytime we saw any images of like sort of queer representation, it was very white and very male. And sort of looking around, sort of craving that kind of imagery and craving representation. And it's sort of this thing of like needing to make those images yourself. And so I if we're sort of doing coming out stories, I remember coming out to my parents as a teenager over 20 years ago, and they had said, "Oh, you're going to hell," and you're all those other things. But they also said, "You learned this in the United States. There are no gay people back home. there are no gay Asians." And I've spent my entire artistic life trying to prove them wrong. So, yeah, I think that's sort of like maybe the thing that we're all sort of responding to as image makers, is like thinking about what did we need when we were when we needed it, and how to sort of put that back out there.
Right.
Absolutely. It's like you're drawing attention to, we have a problem of quantity and a problem of quality. It's like for a while we didn't see any representation, and still in some places there's very little to no representation of queerness or any gay community. but then even in the places where we're starting to see quite a bit more, it remains relatively whitewashed or kind of monolithic, where like I still don't see myself in that. I'm not queer eye for the straight guy. Like, we're not just here for your consumption or to make your wardrobe better. So yeah, there's this really important thing that you're all doing by showing that we exist, and just like making it possible for people to see the truth and the reality of your lived experiences. And many of you are speaking to like photographing your friends and your families and your chosen families. It's really amazing. We need to move to Q&A. Did any of you have any kind of last thoughts on your work, or before we jump to the Q&A session? Okay, cool. Thank you so much for all of your sharing. Okay, so we don't have a mic to pass around to the audience, so if you want to raise your hand, I will call on you in the order that hand was raised, and then taking it back to elementary school, and then I'll repeat your question to the best of my ability. So, any questions out there for our wonderful panelists?
I think each of you, or many of you, talked about photographing people you personally know or are very close to you.
So you're speaking to photographing people that you know, and how does that kind of play a role in the way you think about subjectivity and objectivity?
I think there's so many different versions of photography that we don't really recognize. Some, like, for general audience, like there's photojournalism is one thing, fashion photography is one thing, and like documentary photography is one thing. There's all different kinds of ethic codes behind it. When I'm doing photojournalism work, I obviously have a different role in it. But when I'm doing personal work, I really try to make it a collaboration, especially for this project. For this project, my goal is to make images that make me feel proud, make the person who's in the photo feel proud. And also, there's a quote I remember Grace Lee Bogg said, like, to transform yourself first, to transform the world, something like that. Yeah, I think it's really important to like look into yourself and look into the surroundings, and to really understand the things that's already around you and in yourself, to kind of like, I think social change start from local organizations, and each of us have the power to influence the people around us, to create change in smaller steps, and then that will create a ripple effect to further. Even like, I always think about when I'm doing like certain kind of work, I would think about my parents or my close family, close friends as the target audience, like how they would perceive it. Would they be understanding? Would they ask questions? Would they? I think when I have that kind of audience in my mind, it's easier for me to to reflect on the images I'm making. It's easier for me to kind of put a face in my audience. Yeah, I think it's just really important to know who's, like, the effect of your images. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
I think for me, I see it. Can everybody? Oh, there you go. For me, I see it as a collaboration between the photographer and the sitter. So it's sort of like a conversation that we are having while they're sitting in front of me. So I don't feel like I'm being or like I'm the interloper or anything. I want them to, because the more comfortable they feel, the more natural that they're going to appear. So that's how I see it, or that's how I approach my portraits.
I'm a photographer who hates photography, and what I really really struggle with is this notion of objectivity. Like, why is it just because it's a photograph or it's photography that we can say this is objective or this is a truth, and I just don't think that that exists in any of the practices or genres of photography. Even if you are practicing as a documentary photographer, your presence and your existence or your need of using a fixer and all these sort of issues come to mind. So I really think, I'm really thinking about the Trin Timan Ha essay, Documentaries on Name. And it's just sort of like really thinking about how do we actually sort of, when we're building a picture, really talk about all of it being subjective and all of it being about this thing that we're creating together, as opposed to this like, here's this thing, and you know. So that's my belief.
Yeah, I think for photography in general, it has to always be like a collaborative approach, just because like it's not like a hierarchy where you're like just using that person as a subject, but it's more like can I be a medium for that person to talk about their life and talk about their stories, you know? You're just giving them that platform that they need to just like, you know, exemplify themselves rather than, but you know, as a photographer, of course, you will still put in a part of yourself in the image, but at the same time, you don't want that to obstruct like the general purpose of why you're creating that image.
I also want to like talk about the use of the word subject. Like, can we like talk about that?
Let's do it.
Okay.
I love that you said sitter. I was like, yes, sitter.
For me, I find the word subject so uncomfortable, and so it just sounds so wrong. Definitely hierarchical, like they're just the subject and I'm the king, and I don't like that. So I always try to find other words besides that. So sitter is something that just came to my mind earlier. So I think I'm just going to use it.
Portrait, so.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why I always say like, the people I photograph. And then it also depending on different projects, I would say collaborators. But again, like I also do photojournalism work, and there's a different code of ethics. So for that kind of work, I couldn't. It really depends on the kind of work I'm doing, and I try to be conscious of that. I think for photojournalism, like sometimes when you're working on a story, like you have to have the control to when you give the people you photograph too much control, it kind of it's a little bit hard to tell the truth.
Yeah, I've been looking for a replacement word for subject for a while, because people I photograph or people who were photographed is just very lengthy phrase, but like feeling the pain of that, constantly trying to rethink this and get out of that subject mold. Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
I was just thinking, like a lot you said about how this was imagery that you never had growing up.
Thank you. Just to repeat the question, asking what impact does it have on each of you to create this work and make this exposure possible?
I think I definitely have grown as a person working on this project. I grew up in the 80s and 90s when the idea of like the broad spectrum of the queer community was non-existent. I mean, I'm not going to say non-existent, but it wasn't visual or when I grew up, there was only gay and lesbian. That's it. And working on this project, it's opened my eyes to the broad spectrum of the queer community. And I think that's definitely has changed me, has changed my vocabulary. And also, I was thinking about something else, but I completely am blanking out about your question, which I'm trying to remember right now, but I can't, so I'll just stop.
We'll come back to it.
I think it was about trying to find like have the impact. Like for me, like I was in craving images, finding a community, finding communities, and that's how it's really like even even this idea that we can build our own community and doesn't even have to exist in physical space, but holding space together obviously is important. And so it's sort of, it's just all that you sort of like learn through people and relationships.
I just remembered what I was going to say. And that was that this project has become bigger than me. Like, when I started this project, it was a personal project for me and my friends. And the more exposure this project has gotten, the bigger the audience has become, and the more impact it's made, not only like locally, but globally, I would say. And that's even makes me feel uncomfortable saying that. But it's true. It's like I got an email. My work was written up in NPR about 4 years ago, and I got an email from a monk living in Nepal who was living in the mountains for 40 years, I think he said. And he read the article and he looked me up, and all he said was, "Thank you." And I thought that was pretty amazing that my work was able to reach like the other side of the world. So it's definitely emails like that and messages like that make me obviously continue to want to work on this project. And like I said, this project has become bigger than me. And at this point, I'm that monk who is going to be working on this project for the rest of their lives, meditating, working on that.
That is so amazing. Yeah, I think also I agree with all what you just said, and I think for me now I'm losing. I'm going blank. Wait, can you say something first? I will come back.
Yeah, I think just because I've like been hidden my whole life, just like working with queer people and just feeling that like togetherness, and like that just makes me feel like I can be my true self. And I think it's a beautiful thing when you're able to live your truth and like just like exist like unconditionally, you know? So yeah, I think that's how it impacted me as a person, just being like truthful.
Yes, I was gonna say that. And also, also another thing is like I think through working on this project and meeting so many people, I realized actually my voice matter and our voice matter, which is something that I kind of didn't really internalize and still trying to internalize. But yeah, really doing this and like kind of also doing the show and having just finding people who are working on this in so many different ways, so many diverse ways to photograph queer people of color is so empowering. And like seeing so many versions of ourselves represented in the world, and so that later when other people see it, like, oh, we're not just one-dimensional, we have so many different ways to live. I think that's, yeah, really empowering for myself and for other people, hopefully.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
I think since we're talking about queer projects.
So if you could speak to what queerness is to you, and how do you respond if people ask you what that means to you in your work?
I think queerness for me is to apologetically being me. Yeah, and it's fluid. It should be empowering. Yeah.
I like to think of queer as a verb and not as a noun or something that's fixed, or that queerness needs to be represented in any certain way, or even needs to be defined in terms of a relationship, like queer couples and all that stuff. Like you can really, as a maker can sort of, you don't have to try to represent everything and everyone in one picture. And it's no one has ever asked that. No, like self-identified straight artist is like ever asked, how do you represent straight people or heteronormativity? And so like for me, I think it's a very valid question to ask, but like it can be represented in so many different ways. And I mean, I struggled for a long time and made a rule for myself to never photograph a queer person on a bed or something. And you go, okay, well, I'm gonna, it's like so many times queerness is only sexualized, or you hear these bodies doing this or topless, and it's just sort of like we don't have to work that way. It can be fluid, and you can make any picture that you want to make.
I think for me, queerness is a political statement. I grew up when queer was actually a derogatory term, and over the years it's been recontextualized, and that's what I appreciate about that word and the reasons why I chose to make it part of my project. And yeah, queerness for me is otherness, and celebrating that, and definitely being unapologetic about it.
Yeah, I only discovered the word queer like probably 2 years ago, because like growing up, people only classify you as like gay or lesbian. So like that's the only ways of existing. And like I feel like I relate to the term a lot because it's more fluid and it's ever changing. And it's nice to, even if like it is like some people could classify it as a box or something, but I think it's like ever changing. So there's not necessarily a mold around you. It's just like however you feel, that could be like classified as that, And yeah, I think that's queerness for me.
Thank you all. We're almost at the end of our panel. Ironically, I was planning to ask the "What is queerness to you?" question if we didn't have another question. So, awesome. And thank you all again for being here today, and for you all for being here with us and sharing your incredible work. Just another shout out, I neglected to mention that this exhibit and panel is being put on by Authority Collective, and we are a group of women and non-binary and non-gender conforming people of color. And we do a lot of different work, but mostly we try to provide resources for media makers women and non-binary people of color working in visual media, so photography, filmmaking, VR, etc. And we are bringing this exhibit to a few different places. This is actually our third rendition of the exhibit, Parallax. It has been at Photoville, LA. It is currently up at the Instagram headquarters here in New York, and we'll be there for at least 6 more months. So go check it out if you're hanging out at Instagram. But please start here at Photoville. It's also here. It's actually we have a cube exhibit, and it's close to the entrance. I don't know whether that would be the first or the second entrance, but the entrance furthest from this St. Anne's warehouse right now, so on the farther end. And thank you again, everyone, for being here.